Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, obviously, we are getting G'd up for Path of Exile 2, and with all the excitement, there is a website that's currently up, and I'll put a link in the description, which has been compiling a lot of stuff over the last however many months and years from Path of Exile 2. And I thought we might go through the skill gems in a bit of detail and outline some of the builds, and this is one of my favorite types of videos where we basically just work down the 130 skill gems that we have so far and talk about them. Anyway, let's get into the video and let's talk about the current skill gems that have been so far revealed for Path of Exile 2. Okay, welcome to the website that we're looking at here. So it's poe2db.tw. This is the skill gems section, and I might do a separate video because they also have a few other things. So we're going to split this up, probably make it more bite-sized so that it's a lot easier to digest by everybody. Anyway, so skill gems. So far, we've been given 130, or we can see 130 different skill gems. So Arctic Armor, still pretty much the same. Armor Breaker, which we've seen a lot of, basically is attack with a forceful blow, knocking enemies back and weakening their armor. So it's like a big heavy slam hit, which is what we saw in a lot of the warrior footage. Armor Piercing Rounds, obviously for the mercenary and for the assault rifle builds. Barrage is back. But it's very different. It used to be a support gem, but it looks like it's a standalone gem now, and it's a spell gem as well. So ready a volley of arrows, causing your next bow attack to repeat multiple times. It's really interesting, and I'm assuming you can apply it with different arrows. Barrier of Invocation is definitely totally new. So casting a skill once grants the buff that causes you to gain energy shield when you take energy shield damage from a hit. So basically, it looks like you gain a barrier when you actually get hit, which is cool. Bind Spectre, so captures the spirit of a defeated monster, allowing you to summon it as a minion. Basically, this is the Pokeball skill that they were talking about. Blasphemy is making a way back, and we've already got an idea of the Spirit Reservation. So obviously, Spirit Reservation is going to be a thing and something that we'll have to manage. Bone Cage, so raises a ring of bone spikes around you. These spikes explode when an enemy touches them, damaging and pinning nearby enemies, which means that there's most likely an effect where you can actually crowd control by using, like, arrows and different things like that, if that's how this is set to work. Bone Offering, so impales a skeleton on a bone spike. We saw this in the Necromancer or the Witch footage, sorry. And then that absorbs the minion and then creates a shield, from what we can see here. Bone Shatter is making its way back, so that's still in the game, but it looks like it's vastly different to what it used to be, and it requires specific weapons as well. So attack enemies with a melee strike. The strike will cause a heavy stun on an enemy that are primed for stun. So there is a skill that I saw where it reduces the stun resistance of an enemy. And so then you would then basically load that up first and then hit the enemy with Bone Shatter. Upon causing a heavy stun, it will also create a shockwave, dealing a large amount of damage in an area. So it's going to be a much slower skill. It's not going to be like before, where it's like Bone Storm. Literally what it sounds like, a swarm of bone spikes in the air. Very similar to what Diablo 2. Cast on melee kill. I like these cast on skills, right? I think they're really good. So basically, yeah, max level 1 though is really interesting that this would be max level 1, and it's got a reservation, which means that casts on skills will actually require some form of reservation reduction or management for the spirit system, which is different to Path of Exile 1 in every way. Cast on melee stun, so potentially there's a spell casting ability where you could basically stun an enemy with a hit like Bone Shatter or something else, and then basically you cast a spell. Interesting. Don't know what's going to come of that. Cast on minion death, so we could have like spells that cast when your minions explode or when your minions die, which is really interesting because this is going to be something on the Witch that is going to create some totally different builds. So you could send your flak out and then basically make them really weak so they automatically die, and then basically explode the entire screen if you can kill all your minions at once. Cast on shock, so basically it hits a max point for shock, so you hit maximum shock and then your gem casts, right? The crazy thing is, like, how many of these cast skills could you actually get within the same build? Who knows? You could have cast on minion death with cast while channeling and cast on shock, right? That's pretty crazy. Castable channeling looks basically the same, but again, spirit reservation, and it's 100 for some reason. Like this one's 100 as well, so there might be like a discernment between the power of certain cast-on skills, whether they're a utility skill or not. So that's something that we'll have to think about. Charged staff, so consume all power charges to infuse your staff with electricity for a duration, adding lightning damage and a lightning shockwave to your quarterstaff attacks, which is something that you would probably see on the monk, and we probably saw that in the monk gameplay earlier in the bit. Cold Snap, relatively the same. Comet is what we saw in the original ExileCon footage. So that was where they brought down the ice sort of spike comet sort of thing from the skies. So that's probably going to be quite powerful, and in particular quite powerful early on. Conduction, support any skill that hits enemies, making it more likely to shock. So it's an increased shock. But it's weird because it's not a support skill. Interesting. So there are skills that will not be support skills that will work with skill. Anyway, so it's all about chaining, right? So we do change the way that we build builds, right? And our mindset to how Path of Exile works. Contagion, pretty much the same as before, though reanimating, but it's got a bit of a twist. So afflicts a single enemy with a debuff that deals chaos damage over time. If the enemy dies while affected by contagion, it and all other chaos damage over time. Debuff spread to enemies nearby and refreshes their duration. Reanimating or detonating a corpse affected by contagion will cause the minion or explosion to spread contagion. So you could infect your corpses, explode them, and have that just burst through entire screens. And this is what I was saying, like, I feel like we're going to see some absolutely nuts builds coming out of Path of Exile 2 because of this chainability. To me, that reads as you could basically do a full screen wipe build and mercilessly rip screens apart, and then you would have enough skills to do a single target damage ability and a full screen AoE wipe effect. Now, Dark Effigy. So raises a totem that bombards enemies by afflicted by chaos over time. Debuffs, that's odd. So is that damaging? I don't know. Despair pretty much is, so curse effects are back. So yep, that's the same as before. Detonate Dead is back. Causes a corpse to violently explode, but they haven't provided the percentage of life. Like, will that be based on default corpse level, or will that be based on a set percentage like it is in Path of Exile 1? Detonating Arrow is different because you had Explosive Arrow in PoE 1. So channel to build up power. Okay, so you channel the skill and then just let it go. Earthquake, back in the game, and it looks like it's a fairly bit different. So the Jagged of Ground erupts in a powerful aftershock. So it's pretty much the same, but it's a little bit different. Earth Shatters back in the build. Electrocuting Arrow. Leap forward into the air and fire downwards, hitting an enemy will attach an electrocuting rod to them, causing all incoming lightning damage to apply electrocution. The rod is removed when the enemy is next electrocuted. So you could basically chain, like, proc that on the enemy and then load off a heap of electric or lightning skills and then cause more damage that way. Escape Shot, this is one that we see in a lot of footage where they shoot and they go backwards, because these are like your new movement skills in the game. Pardon me. Essus Drain, it's basically the same as what it was before. Explosive Grenade Launcher. So they actually called it a grenade launcher. So it's exactly what it sounds like. Fire a bouncing grenade that unleashes a devastating blast when its fuse expires. And I would say that you could adjust this to and change the ammunition type so it would explode on hit or stick to an enemy or something like that. Falling Thunder is something that seems really cool. It sounds like a monk skill. So infuse a staff with electrical energies, then slam the ground to deal in a large area of effect in front of you. Consumes any power charges you have to fire lightning projectiles forwards from the impact. So there's the base hit and there's the projectile hit component. Ferocious Roar, so this is for shape shifting, obviously. It's like a war cry. Fireball makes its way back into the game. Firestorm is back in the game. Flame Wall is back in the game, though a little bit different from what we can see here. Flame Blast is back in the game, which is released when you stop using it. It's basically exactly the same as before. Can target solar orbs at a distance, which must be a skill that we'll see going down. Flash Grenade Launcher, 100% blind, or was it 1000% more stun buildup and blinds? So basically blind is going to be a defensive layer. For those wondering, Flicker Strike is still in the game. So yep, you masochists can still play Flicker Strike. How we're going to do that, not sure. That's going to be really interesting. Pardon me. Fragmentation rounds, load your crossbow with piercing bolts that fire in a burst. So basically, this is just like a shrapnel shot sort of thing. Frost Bomb, again, back in the game. Each pulse debuffs it. So it acts as a debuff again, as it did in Path of Exile 1. Frost Wall creates a wall of ice crystals which holds enemies back. The wall will shatter if sufficiently damaged or pushed hard enough, damaging or dealing damage around. So to me, that sounds like you could make a build with that, and you could do like an Ignite build if that's a thing, which was already sort of a thing in Path of Exile 1. So you could bring back Frostwall Ignite in Path of Exile 2 and probably have it go absolutely crazy with the amount of shit that you could potentially do to it. Frostbolts, same as before. Frozen Locust is new, so leap backwards and strike the ground with your staff to call forth an ice crystal, which creates chilled ground around it and can be damaged by you and enemies. If the crystal is destroyed, it explodes, dealing damage based on how long it has existed for. That's a monk skill, hands down. Furious Slam, shapeshift into a bear, is just basically ground slam in bear form. Gas Arrow, so obviously creating a cloud of flammable poisonous gas where it lands. Any burning effect or detonator skills will explode the gas cloud, creating a fiery explosion. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. Glacial Cascade, so this is more an attack skill now, not a spell skill, and rightfully it didn't really work very well as a spell skill in Path of Exile 1, so it sort of struggled its way through, so yeah. Hammer of the Gods is back, or not back, is in the game. Entreats the ancestors to crush your enemies, manifesting a massive hammer that falls to the sky. You can pretty much be 100% guaranteed that I will be playing this build, because this sounds dope. And it's a slam skill, it's not a retaliation skill. So it's sort of going to be like the new retaliation skills, like was it something fist? But hopefully way better. Herald of Ash makes its way back. Pardon me. Herald of Ice is back. Herald of Thunder is back as well with a little bit of change. Hex Blast is still in the game for Path of Exile 2, so it detonates curses on enemies. So if you like Hex Blast, it's still going to be in the game. And with all the changes to mines, this is going to be particularly interesting to see what happens with this. High velocity rounds, so load your crossbow with piercing bolts that consume fully broken arrows, fully broken armor onto enemies to deal extra damage. So I would say these are like single shot, like heavy hitting rounds. Ice Nova is in the game. Ice Shards. So load your crossbow with a clip of icy bolts that rapidly fire at the ground, leaving, so that we saw this in the mercenary gameplay, where he shoots at the ground and then that can explode later down the track. Ice Spear is back in the game, and it's got a very similar sort of effect when armed. Throw an ice copy of your spear. So this is a spear skill. So it requires a spear now. Literally. Throw an ice copy of the spear that deals cold damage. After a short distance, it arms, massively boosting its stamina. That's interesting. So we haven't actually thought much about this because they've got a lot of Amazon skills from Path of Exile 2, from Diablo 2, that potentially making their way into Path of Exile 2 now, because it's very similar in nature. And this is going back to the footage that was released on when they did the Act 2 playthrough like a few years ago or something like that. Ice Strike is coming into the game. We don't have an Ice Strike skill currently. We have Lightning Strike and things like that, and Glacial Hammer. So this is going to be a quarterstaff skill, so this is going to be monk-based. Impale, jump back from a target dealing melee damage. And so it also seems like some of the support, some of the gems that were once supports are going to be actual gems that are like going to load up for the next proc. So you're going to have to be forced to chain skills. Incendiary Shot's pretty straightforward. Load your crossbow with flaming bolts, does fire damage. Infernal Cry, yeah, exactly the same, but it's not exactly the same, but it's relatively the same, and it looks like exerted attacks deal more damage as well, so there's that. Killing Palm, this is definitely unarmed and monk, or unarmed and quarterstaff. Requires level 1. So dash to an enemy and strike them with an unarmed attack, culling enemies if their life is low enough. This is actually just basically a rendition of the monk from Diablo 3, so where you would like have a teleport hit, and you would go and hit an enemy. I can't remember what the skill is called, but yeah, basically that's what that is. So that's going to be really interesting. That's going to be totally abused. Leap Slam, obviously, it's still in the game. Lightning Arrow is still in the game. Lightning Bolt, that's new. So call down a shocking bolt of lightning to strike an enemy. We'll probably end up playing that. Lightning Conduit is still in the game. Calls down lightning to strike all enemies in a cone in front of you. Deals significantly more damage to shock damage. This is probably going to be a lot different because Lightning Bolt is going to look very similar to the old Lightning Conduit. And Lightning Conduit is shooting in like a cone sort of effect. Lightning Rod, different again. So fire an arrow that drops from above, creating a lightning burst. The arrow remains in the ground, and any chaining lightning beams can chain to it. When chained to, the arrows release another lightning burst. So it'll be interesting to see what we do with that. Lightning Storm. It's not a channel skill. Repeatedly attacks enemies in its area with shocking bolts. I like that. Lightning Warp, still in the game. This was once a very strong build in Path of Exile 1, and potentially might be really cool again, or it could just be a mobility skill, but its base damage doesn't seem very... Oh no, it could be good. Could be good. Got to give it a chance. Lingering Illusion. Creates a short-lived copy of yourself whenever you dodge. The copy can distract enemies. So this is some of these dodge modifiers that are coming into the game. So, pardon me, there's like changes to teleport in the dodge. This is an illusion skill that allows the dodge to turn into illusion to divert the enemy away from you. So that could be really cool. Magma Barrier. So when you raise your shield, it infuses with magma. And this is interesting because this was in some Ziggy Deep gameplay footage. So potentially with shields moving forwards, there is the ability to actually actively use them to block and glance blows and things like that. And we haven't seen any footage around this yet. So the fact that when you raise your shield, it infuses with magma barrier for a short time, blocking during the time will spray magma at the enemies. So basically, this is like a defensive, offensive skill in a way that it's a retaliation skill, but it's not. And so I think there was also things around you could direct blocks and things like that, and these potentially are new skills that will allow you to do that. Mana Remnants conjures surging lightning that causes shocked enemies to you or your minions kill to leave behind a mana remnant. So this was basically like you could then like pick up the mana remnant and then continue proccing. So if the Hierophant's in the game still, or some form of it, and mana stacking's in the game, this could actually be really strong with mana stacking crit, if that's a build archetype that becomes a thing. Mana Tempest creates an arcane storm around you. The storm empowers your spells with a lightning damage while making lightning spell projectiles and beams able to hit more targets. So basically you cast the storm and then shoot shit into the storm and it flings it out and kills everything. That seems really OP. That could be really OP. Maul. Shapeshift into a bear and swipe with claw. Like, these skills are really simple considering. Obviously, you don't want them to be too crazy for shapeshifter builds. By the way, I love going through these. This is actually a lot of fun because this is just G'ing me up even more. Oil grenade launcher obviously is what it is. And I would assume, yeah, you can ignite the oil and make it go on fire, which is really cool. Orb of Storm's still in the game. Pain Offering is new. Impale the skeleton on a bone spike to empower nearby minions as long as the spike remains. Perfect Strike. Charge up your weapon. There's no required weapon for this. Charge up your weapon while channeling. Releasing the moment you fully charge will release a wave of fire. This is a warrior skill by the looks. Permafrost Bolts is what it is. Icy Bolts turn things into ice, basically. Poison Burst Arrows is what it sounds like. Fire an arrow that poisons enemies on hit. It's basically just poison arrow. When it lands, it creates a burst of poison affecting all enemies around the arrow. So this could be really good if you are like playing Contagion or something like that, potentially. Power Offering, same thing. Empowers the skeleton on a bone spike, extracting power charges unless the spike's destroyed. We saw this in the Witch gameplay, so we've already seen this. Profane Ritual marks an enemy with a profane rune, dealing chaos damage over time to nearby enemies. While the ritual is complete, the corpse is consumed and you gain a power charge. Puncture is back in the game, but it's probably going to be a lot more powerful because no one really plays Puncture unless they were playing like Bleed Arrow on the Gladiator originally. Raging Spirits are back in the game, but it reserves Spirit now. So is that just auto cast? While active, your fire spells will also summon raging spirits, which are short-lived flame skulls. So that means you would need to cast fire spells. Your fire spells that you cast will cast the raging spirits automatically. So raging spirits is now what they call a buff skill, aka an aura skill, which is really interesting. Rain of Arrows back in the game. Fuzzy Ducks, you'll like that. If you make another Raining Arrows build, most likely. Ray Zombie, obviously it's in the game. And you can do like super zombies and stuff like that. Rampage, shapeshift into a bear. It's just basically a bear skill, but it looks like a channeling version. Rapid Assault performs a series of fast stabs. This looks like something that you'd play with like a spear build or something like that. So they'll be interested in see what happens with that. Resonating Shield. I really like these shield skills because I like defense skills and I know it's going to be a Templar thing. Repeatedly strikes your shield with your weapon, causing damaging. So it's like boom, 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 sort of effect, and then sends a shockwave out to enemies. I am all here for this, and I, for one, will be playing with this skill. That sounds freaking dope. All right, Rolling Magma back in the game. Rolling Slam. I have no idea what that is, but it looks cool. Slams the ground, stuns enemies, and knocks them away. Then continues forward and performs a devocate. This was the one where you like jump up and you spin around and whatever. Seismic Cry back in the game. Taunting enemies and knocking enemies back. If an enemy is stunned, if a heavy stun enemy is hit, your next slam does additional aftershock damage. Shattering Palm, obviously that's a monk skill. Unarmed and Quarterstaff. Shield Charge back in the game. Shockwave Totem. So, pardon me, my nose always itches when it is. So, this is interesting. So, that means if this is... Where'd they get this info from to determine this? Because that means totem skills are still back in the game. Anyway, that's interesting. So we're going to look at that more. Siphoning Strike, dash to a target and strike them with the quarterstaff. If the target is shocked, consume the shock to release a lightning shockwave around the target. Skeletal Arsonist, so a bomb-throwing skeleton, hard-hitting skeleton, basically skeleton brute. A healing skeleton, frost skeleton, Reaver, summons aggressive, reviving skeletal Reavers that can enrage on command. Sniper skeletons, storm skeletons, skeletal warriors. Holy shit. Snipe back in the game, 300% increased critical damage bonus. Sniper's Mark is back in the game. Solar Orb creates a stationary fire orb that periodically releases an explosion, dealing fire damage. Casting the skill again will replace the previous orb. Enemies that are very close to the orb will take burning damage. Spark is back in the game. Anime Princess will like that if you play in Spark builds and PoE 2 most likely. Spearfield, I remember them talking about this at ExileCon 1, like 5 years ago. And basically this will be where you, stab the ground causing multiple spears to burst out of the ground in front of you in a large area. And this is probably coming from the original Path of Exile to the second set of footage that came from ExileCon, I think. Or actually, it was an intermediate release, and this was like 2 or 3 years ago that showed Act 2 with like all the spear gameplay. Staggering Palm obviously is one that staggers things, and this is strike with an unarmed attack. Dash an enemy and strike them with an unarmed attack. That says quarterstaff, that's interesting. Stampede charges forwards, cracking the earth and leaving a patch of jagged ground with every footstep. That seems really cool. That's like a there was I think Scion out of League of Legends sort of skill. Storm Spear, obviously this is your lightning Javazon. That was in D2, so this is what we have seen from this. Stormcaller Arrow, so fire an arrow that embeds where it lands. After a delay, the arrow will call down a lightning strike with a high shock chance, which means there are probably supports that reduce the amount of duration that it has to be idle for. Summon Wolf, summons a wolf minion. Animancers, Animilomancers. Bam, Druid. I would say Druid's actually going to have a summoning class, and I reckon it's going to be pretty powerful. But yeah, anyway, Sunder. So yeah, there's what it is, Sunder. Supercharged Slam. This is actually in PoE at the ExileCon, and it basically is literally like a hypercharged slam. When you hit the ground, it goes boom, and it's really cool. Tempest Bell. We saw the bell in the ExileCon 2 monk footage, I'm pretty sure, or something like that. So yeah, but literally just throws a bell down. So build combo by successfully striking enemies with any skill. After building 5 stacks of combo, create a bell that can hit your enemies, casting a damaging shockwave. Elemental ailments applied to the bell causes. So when you proc the bell with an ailment, it procs the enemy, which is similar to an orb skill that's currently in Path of Exile 1. It was a Void Sphere or something like that. something sphere. Tempest Flurry performs a series of aggressive strikes, ending with a powerful shocking blow. Temporal Chains, back in the game. Tornado, back in the game. That's going to be really cool. Toxic Growth, leap into the air and fire a volley of arrows, which creates toxic pustules to sprout from the ground. So that is basically Toxic Rain, right? Potentially have changed it, but Toxic Rain might come back, but that basically looks like Toxic Rain. Unearth, so raise spikes of bone from the earth in front of you, damaging enemies. The bones of corpses in the area are ripped out and reassembled into short-lived bone construct minions. Oh, that's really cool. So Unearth is actually a minion skill now, and it's not like explode on the ground sort of thing. That's actually, no, that is how it works now. So, yeah, no, that's back in the game. Vine Arrow, so fire an arrow into the air that lands after a short delay, causing a plant to spring up out of the impact location. The plant-supported vines then latch on the enemies nearby, poisoning. So you would use Toxic Growth in a combination of Vine Arrow, from what I can see here. Volcanic Fissure, back in the game. Volcano, creates a volcano. Now we're getting pretty crazy. This will be a Sork skill, most likely. Creates a volcano that fires projectiles around it. Channeling the skills caused it to fire more projectiles and deal more damage when it first erupts. Any slams near the volcano cause it to erupt, firing projectiles. How the hell does that work? Is that a warrior skill or is that a Sork skill? I don't know. Vulnerability, same as before, Wave of Frost. Mainly sounds like Wave of Conviction. Flip backwards while sending a freezing wave of ice to an area in front of you, so it's like a defense skill. Whirling Assault, advance while hitting enemies around you, so it's basically like a mobility skill. This is like a WASD skill. Whirling Slash is probably going to work the same. And Wind Blast. So strike enemies at range by generating gusts of wind as you swing. Enemies will be knocked back based on how close they are to you. Anyway, that's the 130 skills that we know of so far that this site has been compiling. Now, I'm not too sure of the source of accuracy and how accurate these are. They will probably significantly change or marginally change in some cases. And there are a lot more skills that we are aware of that are being added to the game. But yeah, if you want to know what skills are in the game and a bit of a deep dive and a bit of an idea of some of the build archetypes that could come from it, definitely this was the video to look at. But yeah, anyway, it all seems pretty cool. But yeah, if you want to see me do this with support gems and whatnot, and there's also buff gems in the game too now, which is just auras. They're calling them like buffing gems or whatever. Let me know in the description and I'll do another video like this in the next day or so. We'll go through the support gems and buffing gems. But yeah, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. And yeah, stay tuned for, don't forget to follow the Twitch as well. And stay tuned for more Path of Exile 2 content.